This episode is brought to you in part by the Apologetics Guy Show, the podcast that helps you find clear answers to tough questions about Christianity. Learn to explain your faith with courage and compassion. Join Moody Bible Institute professor Dr. Mikel Del Rosario at apologeticsguy.com.
What follows is a bonus episode of Truce. It doesn't fit into the normal flow of Season 6, which is exploring why some evangelicals tied themselves to the Republican Party in the 1970s and 80s. If you're interested in picking up that storyline, go back to the beginning of Season 6 with the episode Prologue, What is Biblical? Because this season is so heavy, I want to take a brief break to hopefully restore your faith in humanity and maybe spur you to take your next steps in your faith journey. God willing, we'll get back to the regular season in 2 weeks. Let me know your thoughts about this little side project at trucepodcast@yahoo.com. This is Camino del Norte, Part 2. A few weeks ago, my twin brother and I hiked about 250 miles across the north of Spain, where we met lots of people and engaged in deep conversations about politics, our lives, and God. We'll pick up the trail in Santillán, a village with a tiny grocery store, only a few restaurants, a church, well, there's always a church, and our albergue, or pilgrim hostel, which was perched on a hill. About a kilometer away was an impressive mine carved into the limestone cliffs. I stopped to interview a fellow hiker in the front yard of our albergue. We are in Santillán, Spain.
Yeah, hi.
Hi there.
Hi.
We just met a few minutes ago, an hour ago.
That's true.
What is your name?
My name is Yannick, and I'm from Montreal, Canada.
How many Caminos have you done?
I done one Camino in France for 2 years, and I've ended it this year, and now I'm doing the Camino del Norte for 1 month.
Amazing. So you do a little piece of a Camino at a time.
Yeah, because unfortunately I'm working. I'm still young, and I have only 1 month a year, every year to do the Camino. So I'm using that month to walk on the Camino. It takes about 1 week just to get disconnected of the real life, you know?
Yeah.
So it gives me 3 weeks of disconnected reality, you know?
Do you feel disconnected now?
Yes, I am. Totally. I have no idea what's happening in the world. I barely watch the news. I have no idea. It could be the World War III, and I wouldn't know it.
And has this been a good experience for you?
It's always a nice experience. It's it could be rain. There could be I'm expecting everything. For the first 2 years, I reserved everything. You know, like all the albergue, and I knew where I was going and everything. This year, I wanted to say, okay, I'm going to freestyle. Anything could happen. Just going to walk from one destination to another. And if I get some place to sleep, then I get some place to sleep. And if I have to walk further or have to go back, then I'll do it, you know. So
really?
But today I called. And I got stuck. I think there's a really huge game, a soccer game, happening right now, from Bilbao to against Manchester United. Every hotel, albergue, and everything was full. So I took a taxi, which was like a 20 kilometers jump from Portugalete, where I was, to here.
Why do you do these Caminos?
You know, I'm an atheist, so most people do it for the religion thing. I'm not religious at all. But I love architecture, so I visit churches, you know, all the time. Every time I see a church, I go. You know, I'm spiritual, so I want to know a little bit more about myself. You know, the fact that I'm traveling alone, I have so much time to think about myself,
So you've been doing a lot of thinking about yourself. Has it been a good process? Have you found good things about yourself you like?
Definitely. Yeah. It's more about where I am right now. I'm 46 years old, you know, and so I'm wondering what I've done in my life, what I want to do in the future, you know.
This is the second albergue I've been to where they had tents, and our friend stayed in one a few nights ago and loved it. Up in the albergue, we're going to have 20 people in a room, maybe.
Yeah, and I'm a snorer.
What? It's going to be you?
Yeah, that's me.
That's okay. I have
I'm
earplugs.
sorry.
I have
I'm
earplugs.
Sorry.
It'll be
And
okay.
I remember a really loud one.
May 2nd, Nick and I have sneaked out of our albergue room where somebody was coughing last night near us. So I had to wear a mask, N95 mask, to try to help block some of that. But we've got that technique where we try to have everything packed up in the morning so we can grab our bag and just walk out without sorting it. But that means finding a place where you can sort everything. So we're in a hallway right now near an elevator. And so you've got this task of trying to figure out what am I going to need today? And can I put it towards the top of my bag? This is a game we play every single day.
I mean, trail mix. It's good audio. We're cinching up the bags here, getting ready to walk. Well, we had a pretty great dinner last night. We had a few Germans, a South Korean, Canadian, South African, Italian, and 2 Americans. We were in a hostel. We had left our trail family behind the day before, kind of wondering what would come of that night. Are we going to have any friends? Are we going to have anybody to sit with and all that stuff? I had kind of been gathered in one of the cafes with 2 guys who didn't speak English very well. And we found a place that opened up early for dinner, which is a miracle. And I just started asking everybody at the albergue if they wanted to come dinner. And we had a big table of people who all kind of could speak some English together. And boy, we just had the most wonderful conversation. In fact, there was a guy on the end of the table who was asking some pretty good political questions, and Chris was able to answer. And such a treat to be able to share a real conversation with somebody about real topics. And it was just a special, special night. We went from really like, are we going to be eating alone, to, boy, this is maybe the best conversation we're having on the trail. Yeah, it was a surprise to basically lay out season 6 of the podcast so far. Yeah. Going all the way from, libertarianism. I had a whole kind of rundown on libertarianism outside the hostel, to women's rights and politics and things. I think it worked out really well, and I was really glad Nick was there because he was able to kind of take part of the table. I was able to take part of the table, but try to keep bringing it back to, hey, I gotta make sure I clearly state what the gospel is in this conversation, so that it's not just sort of a broad general religion talk, but really be clear that Christ didn't die for this kind of nonsense. It was to set people free from sin. But because everybody's so interested in the political stuff of our country, and it's affecting everybody in a deep personal way, because a lot of people lost a lot of money in the stock market over the last few months, it's a good intro to the things that Chris has covered on the podcast during the season. And to be able to bring some hopeful calm and perspective to things is really nice. No, we're actually not in unprecedented times. And one of the things we've talked about in the past was toyed with the idea of bringing like a mission team out here to do a Camino. But part of there are several things we'd have to cover in training. One is we'd have to keep it to a small group so that people didn't want to just come together and not talk. Or you spread everybody out. Yeah, spread everybody out. But the other thing is like training to say, our goal here is not to convince you of a certain idea of politics. Our goal is to love on you and to share the gospel. There was somebody here on the Camino who seems to be putting his politics over his faith in some ways, or his pride in where he's from over his faith. And so there was actually somebody who was kind of exasperated yesterday at the hostel at the mention of that guy, and that's not good. Yeah. So I think a big part of coming out here is trying to remember what is the real focus. It's fun to talk about politics and especially international stuff with people from all around the world. But the main thing is the gospel and trying to set the record straight about what it really is. And one of the things I was wrestling with yesterday is we had a lot of bike path walking out of the city. It was just sort of difficulty with myself and my weird blend of giftings and problems. And then you get to a table conversation like that, and it's like almost like I am built for this conversation. Like we are built for this conversation. Yeah, for sure. As sort of odd as our giftings can feel sometimes, it's funny to walk into those situations and be like, oh,
this is why. And this is where I'm supposed to be. I think at one point you had mentioned, like, this is where we were supposed to be tonight. And it sure felt like that. Like,
I really think so.
wow. It was a detour from what we thought we were going to be. Different place from the Camino family we had originally made. But boy, if it didn't just fit perfectly.
That day, it rained on us again. Enough to keep the weather cool, but not enough to make us miserable. A few days later, I was stung or bitten on the wrist by an insect, possibly when we stopped to pick wild strawberries by the side of the trail. It didn't hurt, but it left a nasty welt, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but 3 years earlier, I got blood poisoning on the Camino Frances from a bug bite and had to go to the hospital for antibiotics. Now, faced with those scary memories, I grew concerned about this new problem. Nick and I hiked alone for several more hours through intermittent rain to Rio Seco, where we met a group of medical professionals, the perfect people for a wounded pilgrim. They gave me the all clear on the welt and told me to use the antibiotic cream I'd picked up when I fell into the stinging nettle a few days earlier. That evening, we ate salads outside the Church of San Vicente, a large stone building that, like most churches we came across, was closed up, used mostly on Sunday, and packed away until the following week. The next day, we hiked along a high ridge. To our right was the ocean, dotted with large rocks and small beaches. We were supposed to hike on to Santonia that night, but when we got to the surfer city of Laredo, we both felt we needed to stop there instead. So we canceled our reservation and took a seat on a stone bench outside of a convent to wait in line.
A few minutes ago, Nick and I attended an event at the Iglesia de Santa Maria here in Laredo, Spain, which is a beautiful oceanside area with a wide beach, a really wide sandy beach. It was a ceremony to see, well, a woman become a nun. It was kind of wonderful. They had a lot of happy, upbeat songs that they sang, and they did a dance. There were 3 nuns dancing around, carrying a chalice and some flowers and things, in this big church that had the bricks on the either side looked kind of like almost like cinder blocks, but kind of rough cinder blocks. Yeah. Nick found it kind of moving actually to pray to for the lady. It was a really special moment just to share this moment in this woman's life with maybe 80 other people, 70 other people, and have a little bit of music. And it was just nice to pray and be thankful for being in that place and sharing with them.
This service was just one of several that we saw along the trail. In the last episode, we established that a lot of pilgrims on the Camino de Santiago, the Catholic pilgrimage, are not people of faith, let alone Christians. Today, we'll explore what fills its place. I'll chat with hikers, stop by a pseudo-spiritual way station, and talk with someone who stayed in an actual cult. You're listening to the show that uses journalistic tools to look inside the Christian church. We press pause on the culture wars in order to explore how we got here and how we can do better. I'm Chris Starrin, and this is Truce. Welcome back. Today I'm taking you on a 250-mile journey across the north of Spain, as my brother Nick and I section hiked the Camino del Norte. When we spoke with that young woman on the bridge that I featured in the last episode, she told us that we just had to stop at the Albergue de Peregrinos de Güemes, a few days out. She glowed as she described the place, and Ernesto, the founder of the albergue. Now we'd arrived, and I walked around the outside of the building.
It has a very strong spiritual leaning. So there's, a painting of a woman with her legs crossed in one hand, like up to her chest. There's going to be a talk here soon. Not sure what it's supposed to be, but right before dinner. And there are all sorts of little tchotchkes from world travels. I'm standing on the back porch area near the clotheslines, and I can see, maps. I can see photos of all around the world. Also photos of a man who looks like Dr. Hammond from Jurassic Park, from the original movies, with a white beard, sort of a Santa Claus beard. The woman who showed us to our room was excited every time she talked about the gentleman who founded this place, and this Jeep, this Land Rover that is on display in one corner under a little shed that he supposedly took all over the place, and maybe we'll hear about that today.
It does have sort of that cult of personality vibe to it. The official website lays out the history of the place. The original building, the house, is over 100 years old, built by Ernesto's parents who had 15 children. He attended seminary and served parishes around the region, including one at the top of a steep path, a community isolated from much of the rest of Spain. Along the way, he and friends drove around Africa and America, seeking out other cultures. Another trip took them to India, Turkey, Iran, and all over Europe. It seems that Ernesto came to see all religions as essentially the same. I made a pact with our roommate. If one of us finds out that this place is trying to brainwash us, we'll let the other guy know. About 40 pilgrims were encouraged to show up to a large room. It's not easy for pilgrims to sit still. We were tired and sore. For an hour, Ernesto recounted the history of the albergue, which is fine, also kind of confusing. There are likely hundreds of albergues in Spain. Why not just to learn about just one when we're hungry and achy? There was a good bit that encouraged us to see ourselves as similar to migrants around the world. But it took him an hour to say that. It was a slow presentation, with a stern woman translating as best as she could. I talked with Nick about my feelings as we left the room, making a comparison to the sitcom Seinfeld.
I kind of feel like George Costanza when he has that Sunshine Carpet Cleaners come.
Oh yeah, that's it?
It's a cult that comes and cleans your carpet for cheap, but they won't pitch to him.
Yeah.
And so he feels left out. We didn't get our pitch.
I guess not.
It was sort of just a vague talk about everybody being migrants, and you're special for being special. Yeah.
Ernesto continued his talk downstairs during dinner. I don't think my early judgment of the place was fair. As far as I can tell, the albergue isn't a cult, so much as a way station for the spiritually lost. Unlike Francis Schaeffer, who welcomed pilgrims to his Swiss chalet to discuss Jesus and give them direction, Ernesto's albergue offers hazy discussion of peace, but no answers and no instructions on how to obtain peace. Places like these seem good in small doses, but for some, lead to a sort of pleasant paralysis, where one can get focused on ambiguity and lose a greater sense of themselves, society, and any concrete notions about God. I sat down in the backyard with a fellow pilgrim, Joseph from Texas, a gentleman who recently retired and was working on his Spanish.
Can you name some of the countries you've met people from?
Korea, Australia, Brazil, of course all of Europe, Ireland, England, Scotland, France, Italy, Germany, Canada, the US, it goes on and on, Mexico. So, yeah, everybody.
Everybody's here.
The world.
Has that opened up any conversations for you that have been enlightening in any way over the various Caminos?
Yeah. I was traveling with happened to be this young German girl, and we were at a albergue in the kitchen making dinner. And I just asked her casually if her boyfriend cooks. I assumed that they lived together. And the way she looked at me saying, no, but that's okay, I could kind of see that it really wasn't necessarily okay the way she said it. It was kind of a hesitancy. Well, I don't cook at home. And it made me think, I wonder how my wife responds to that question. So one of my lessons from that Camino was to go home and start cooking.
And you did?
Yeah, and I got fired. My family won't let me cook anymore. But I tried, and I think they appreciated that.
Yeah. You're on a religious pilgrimage. We're going from monastery to, church to cathedral. Is there any kind of religious aspect to this for you?
Religion's already a part of my life. God's already a part of my life. I wake up each day saying, okay, what do you called me to be? Who you called me to be? So it's great to be a part of places where people have walked for over 1,000 years to go to a place for a religious purpose. So yeah, I'd like to kick that part in a little bit more the next number of weeks for the rest of the Camino Norte. But so far it's been not as much as I would have wanted.
Sure. Waking up in Güemes, I resigned to the fact that I was sick with a cold. My nose was running, I was sneezing, and so was our roommate. Nick and I wouldn't stay in hostels for the next few days so we didn't spread whatever I had. Instead of eating with the other pilgrims, I sat alone in the corner, wolfed down a breakfast of bread and jelly, and headed outside to minimize infections. The hike led us through lovely cow pastures, to a boat across a wide bay to reach the city of Santander, a large, handsome city with a walkway along the water. Nick was a trooper, and we were due for another 0 day. I donned an N95 mask and we walked around the city, stopping at an archaeological museum.
Nothing like seeing a shelf of rocks without descriptions to start your morning.
Then touring the royal residence at the end of the peninsula, where we got a classic Spanish tour, meaning they skipped over anything of interest from the Inquisition to the Moors, the history of the Caminos, or Napoleon, and focused instead on minutiae about sconces and chandeliers. Classic. After a day and a half of rest, or what passes for rest on the trail, we took the wrong bus across town to rejoin the Camino.
Thus continues our tour of Spain's small engines and garbage trucks.
Early morning hiking in cities means an endless string of men in yellow vests cutting grass with a weed whacker instead of a lawnmower. I don't know why they don't use lawnmowers in northern Spain, but they don't. It's weed whackers all day, every day. Others gathered trash and recycling.
And 10 minutes later, here is the sound of a trash truck. Yet another one. To our right is the ocean, and we can see the beaches of Santander. Really lovely, actually.
Yeah.
And it's the morning.
I had decided to do the coastal route, even though most of our acquaintances that we had met along the way were going to go the inland route to try to shave off some extra miles. We came here, for a little extra beauty and some views, so why not do the coastal route, even though it's a little longer?
Well, it seems like there's a point in every Camino where I hit a wall where I start to just kind of question myself.
Yeah, me too.
I've been hitting that wall, questioning, why didn't we marry, or one of us marry so-and-so?
I think we're just too hard on ourselves. We say that a lot, but yeah, we think a lot of the things that don't necessarily have right and wrong answers are moral failures, and they're not. You made a choice and you went with it. And no big deal like today. We're walking a little further than we had to, but we're also had to make a choice, and a choice to see the coast. It's not a bad one.
No.
In fact, it's quite lovely.
That afternoon we stopped at a cove, surrounded on 3 sides by rock with a lovely, quiet beach. Nick waited patiently as I went for my second swim of the hike. I descended a steep set of stairs carved into the rock.
It's a beautiful beach here. Chris is contemplating going in, but it's steep and it's cold. He's in, he did it. It's Gollum at the ocean.
It was chilly, but I got used to it and ran on the beach by myself. We didn't see a single other pilgrim all day and stayed in another pension because of my illness. The following morning, we hopped a train to cross a bridge that pilgrims are not allowed to walk on and picked up the inland route our friends had taken. The day was industrial with large buildings on our left and a wide pipe in the ditch to our right. We used headphones to listen to podcasts to pass the time in the industrial area before arriving in a town that really surprised us.
We're in Santillana del Mar, Spain. We were walking today and came across this beautiful medieval village, unlike anything we've seen so far. Very quaint and strangely touristic. But we just had a really nice conversation with a man who was from Ireland, and feels like God's been talking to him because he downloaded the Bible, audio Bible, and was listening to that, and then had the inspiration the other day to just, what is the Lord's Prayer? Having gone to Catholic school, he recited it, but didn't know it and didn't know the meaning of it. So he's been studying the Lord's Prayer, and that was a real godsend.
He just chat GPT'd it. It sounds like it broke it down sentence by sentence for him, which is really cool.
Wow. I'm kind of excited. Tonight in our convent, there is, at 7 o'clock, there's going to be some kind of meeting, kind of similar to the one we went to in Güemes, but I'm hoping that this one will actually have some kind of spiritual content to it.
This was one of our favorite places to stay. It had a big yard surrounded by a high wall, and one of the rare clotheslines that was in direct sunlight, so our clothes actually dried. It sounds like a small thing, but it went a long way. We enjoyed a cheap dinner of chicken and vegetables with a sublime pudding.
I find myself in one of the cells of what used to be a convent. The floors are really uneven, different kinds of wood, some of them rounded, some of them flat, and the hallway is much the same. I'm going to walk down to the chapel service.
2 nuns led us, asking pilgrims to introduce themselves. They established who would participate in readings and taught us their simple songs.
The Camino is like life itself. There's a starting point and an arrival point. And along the way...
Then a reading from Matthew 13 about the kingdom of heaven being like treasure hidden in a field. We prayed for peace in the world, pilgrims on the Camino, and for everyone in a bad situation, singing between each prayer.
It's just after 7 in the morning, and our cell in the convent is right across from the bathroom. It's a spot that you don't want, and we can hear everything. And they can hear us. And they can hear us.
Bonne Herzog. We are walking on the path. The path represents life. It represents loneliness, desperation. Man's desperate try to find meaning on the road.
We are hiking, nearing the end of the day, a 25-kilometer day.
26 today.
26-kilometer day.
Well done.
We've had the pleasure of hiking with a lady named Lisa from Canada. What a joy to have another person for the vast majority of the day.
Yeah, it was so nice.
Break out all the usual stories about Ernest Shackleton and
Atomic science.
Boris Pash.
Oh, we got into some good pash.
Yeah, the hikers can't get enough of Boris Pash stories.
They're clamoring for it, which is why we're alone right now.
No. No, we're alone because she stopped almost a kilometer ago. I was kind of praying the other day that it'd be nice to be walking with pilgrims again. We got a taste of it yesterday as we were coming into town. We ran into these young guys, and they were talking about Yellow Bakery.
Oh.
Did you hear about that?
No.
Once again, I got something wrong. It was actually called the 12 Tribes, which operates the Yellow Delis. They deserve a little detour. The restaurants are on several continents, selling sandwiches made by unpaid volunteers, which raises obvious questions about labor laws. They mix the Bible with communal living, which may sound appealing, but hold that thought.
Apparently there is a cult that has hostels on either side of Donostia San Sebastian, and they try to use this as sort of a way to find people who are wandering spiritually and bring them into their cult. Yeah, a bunch of young guys were filling me in on that yesterday.
Alexandra, a German friend we met on the trail, stayed one night in their hostel a few weeks earlier.
Well, it was at the end of the day, and my companion on that day was really tired, and she felt that she couldn't walk on.
Yeah.
So there was this truck stopping by and asking if we needed help, and we said no, or I said no. Then he said, well, if you need anything, you can stop by at our place. And we're right down the road. It's not very far. And then I asked, well, how much farther it would be to the next town? And he said, that would be another 4 kilometers, which turned out not to be true, by the way.
Oh, it was closer or further?
Yeah, it was closer.
Oh, okay.
It was much closer. We stopped there and asked if they had beds too. And they said, yeah, sure, we have beds. No problem. So we were invited to join their dinner. While having dinner, we found that they were dressed in a very different way. All the women had to cover their hair, and the guys had bands around their
foreheads.
So, and they had all long hair, which looked kind of like out of the Bible.
Okay.
It was interesting. And then during dinner, they all set the pilgrims on different tables so they wouldn't cling together. And then they talked about the Bible in general and the way of their living.
Yeah. Wait, did you notice any sort of weird parts of their Bible beliefs?
No, just that they said that they would adhere very much to the scripture. So take it very literal.
And what was the name of the place, do you remember?
Toco del Peregrino. They were just talking about their beliefs and how they have different places all over the world, and that if you join them, you could go You could join all the different places too. You could travel around. So they kind of try to make it very attractive.
Behind the granola-coated exterior is something dark. Not only have they been called into question because of labor violations, but there have also been allegations of child abuse, racism, and sexual abuse. One of their documents is called the Confederation Manifesto, something you can find for free on their website. It includes a blatant defense of the American Confederate South. Here's a quote from page 5.
These northern youth were deceived into thinking the South had fired on their flag without provocation, and that their lives were the ransom paid to free the slaves. But in the South, they had lived in peace with their black servants, whose lives were 100 times better than laborers in the cities of the North or in Africa, since they were cared for by their new masters who had bought them, just as Abraham, as a good master, cared for the slaves he had bought.
Something that, just to be clear, is completely bogus, totally bogus. But maybe it gives you a window into the kind of organizations that are preying on pilgrims on the Camino. Because there are people searching for answers on those trails. So there are groups trying to fill that void, for good or for ill. Some, like my brother and I, point people to the gospel, that all of us have sinned, that because God is just, we deserve death for that sin. But Jesus took the punishment for us, so we should follow him. But there are also groups like the 12 Tribes, which sound appealing until you scratch the surface. Or Ernesto's hostel in Güemes, that is kind of a spiritual waiting room, offering no answers. It's easy to get burdened by all these forces that prey on pilgrims. But a friend gave me a helpful reminder. Nick and I arrived in Comillas, a handsome tourist city with a great bakery. We stopped to rest on a park bench and our Irish friend came by, the one who felt he needed to learn the Lord's Prayer. He grew up in a country where there had been loads of scandals. But he said it was also important to remember the loving teachers he had at a Catholic school as a boy, who gave him a solid education, took care of him at an impressionable age, and reminded me that there are loads of people quietly doing the work of God who don't make the news. I think of the older ladies in our church who have spoken into my life, my encouraging friend who has lunch with me about once a month. Or later, when Nick and I were in Madrid, he saw a grate in the sidewalk that had fallen into a drain, leaving a big hole in the sidewalk where people could hurt themselves. He quietly lifted the grate, dropped it back in place, and continued on his way. There are little acts of mercy all around us, if we're willing to look for them. Nick and I discussed this as we walked to Anquera, a small town on the border of Asturias and Cantabria.
I think our temptation as Americans is to start programs and to build infrastructure and buildings and things like that. And I think just having more thoughtful pilgrims who are willing to reach out on this trail would make sense. And it makes me think about Francis Schaeffer. And one of the things I actually admired in reporting that story for the season was that he built his ministry to reach out to spiritual pilgrims. And they came flocking, trying to learn more about Jesus and his philosophy. And of course, Francis Schaeffer then got into a bunch of Christian nationalism things as another part of his life, and it dominated the conversation in the episode because that's really what the season is about. But I think there's a real need Christians to reach out, not just on the Caminos, but it's the world of drifters and wanderers and pilgrims, because there's a sizable number of them. They fall into a series of certain camps, and so kind of once you learn how to speak with people in those camps, you could open up a lot of room for conversations about Jesus. And Nick is staring at his phone because there's some question as to whether where we're staying tonight. We're kind of approaching our hostel.
Yeah, my main goal is to try to see the layout of the town in case there's a grocery store or something like that. Doesn't look like it really.
Well, these are all the considerations we have. It isn't just sort of a vacation. There's a lot of trying to figure out where we're staying. Yesterday, we stopped at a campground. We were trying to figure out where best to stay tonight. One of our acquaintances called on the phone and the people didn't speak English. They only spoke Spanish. And so I scrambled and found a group of Spanish speakers off in the corner and asked if they could speak English and asked them to reserve the room for me, which was a huge help. Again, a little bit of Camino togetherness and looking out for each other. Much appreciated. I'm surprised how good my feet feel.
I'm excited to get back and start working on the podcast again. In the midst of working on some really fun episodes, I'm excited to get back to those. Here we are 3 weeks in, and I'm starting to calm down.
Yeah. I am sad to say that the same is true for me. It's taken a long time, but even today, I was laying in bed and able to put aside all my grumblings of people moving around too early or making too much noise, and a lot more easier being able to put that away. I'm just finally feeling more relaxed and happier. So, that's okay. So this is what we're here for, and if it took 3 weeks, it took 3 weeks. So. It was pretty hot in there too.
I wanted to leave the door open into the hallway, but there's this thing that albergues love here, which is a motion sensor light in the hallway.
Oh, I hate it.
And so every time somebody got up to go to the bathroom, they would have to open this big heavy door, and then the light would come on in the hallway. So you had the noise of the door, the light coming on. It's funny how those little things make a huge difference. Our hostel that night, to our surprise, consisted of private rooms. A huge blessing after a restless night and a long day. Nick gathered some friends and we walked around looking for food. Most pilgrims want to be asleep around 9 o'clock, but restaurants in Spain don't even open until 7:30 or 8. So we hung out for an hour getting refreshments before heading to an upscale taco restaurant in a light rain.
What happened? Oh, people are...
There's a truck full of men shouting, and there's honking in the square. Walking down the end of the street after we've had tacos, and there's some kind of celebration happening spontaneously with people standing around, all of them wearing scarves. The Cantabria football team won, apparently, and so there's a celebration going on. One member of our group said, "How should we celebrate?" And they said, "Drink beer." It's 9:15 at night. I think we're all just gonna go to sleep. This is a quintessential Camino night. Friends from Lithuania, Germany, Norway, United States, and a celebration. Inevitably, there's some kind of crazy celebration going on. Oh, yeah. The boom you heard there was one of a series of fireworks. 2 members of our group stayed up with the soccer team in the bar downstairs from our hostel. Nick and I went to bed. The last thing we heard before falling asleep was the athletes singing "One Floor Down." The next day, we set out with 3 friends, marching up a slope in the early morning light. To our left, snow-capped peaks. To our right, farms, small villages, and hills. We hiked together for a few hours, veering off the prescribed route to enjoy the coast. Nick and I parted ways with the group to swim in an empty beach. Nick and I are going to go for a swim, but these guys hovering around with big cameras and lenses. It's like, guys, just give us a little space. Here we are. They're over there. One of them looks like Greg Daniels. Greg Daniels is the creator of the American TV show The Office and Parks and Recreation. It wasn't him.
I went all the way under 3 times. I feel really good about that. It was good.
It's like watching Raquel Welch run across the beach.
Gotta live a little.
Gotta live a little. Yeah. We continued to the port city of Lalanes, where we had dinner with our German friend Alexandra, who you heard from earlier. A delicious caprese salad and pizza. Before we parted ways, we sneaked into our hostel for an interview. The hostel keeper was not happy about having me there, since I wasn't a guest. What is your name?
My name is Alexandra.
And where are you from?
I'm from Germany.
Well, we're talking, this was your last day of hiking.
Yes.
How do you feel?
Well, a little bit sad because I have to leave so many people behind that I got acquainted with and that I got to know a little bit. I would have loved to walk on, but I just have to go home because my vacation's over.
Okay, yeah. Has this been a good Camino?
Oh yes, a very good Camino. Very, very, very good.
Yeah.
Very good community, very lovely people that I met. I feel enriched. I had great experiences. I really loved, I feel like I'm walking on air.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh wow! But are you sad at all to be leaving?
Yes,
or are you
yes,
excited to go
definitely.
home?
That too. No, I'm sad to be leaving, but in a way. But I know I'll come back.
I was really feeling the weight of leaving the trail. So many good memories, so many fascinating people. On our final morning of walking, we left Lalanes with a group of pilgrims. Nick and I recapped that day later that night. we just did the last day of our hike.
Wow. And what a good day to finish on, too.
A spectacular day. Ribadicella, I think, is where we are.
Yeah. We hiked on the main part of the Camino at first with lots of people, which is great, which took us down onto a beach. And there was this big series of rocks with a hole through one of them that we could see the ocean through the other side. It was just so pretty, and everybody's in a good mood. And then we ran into our old friend Lisa, which was just a treat.
Yeah, she just little two roads coming together, and she was coming down one, we came down the other. Just picked it right up where we left off a couple days ago.
Chatted the whole rest of the way, and even though there were storms on the horizon, we decided to go and do a northern loop up on the coast. And boy, was that worth it. It was so dramatic and pretty. Just these craggy rocks and lots of just pounding waves onto these rocks. And there were even caves that had been worn away over time that were shooting air or water into the air, like these big flumes of water into the air. And you're walking through goat and cow pastures and looking at these incredible views. And so there were five of us, right? That were hiking together there for a little while.
It sounded like you had a really good conversation going with the Scottish guy we were with.
I did, yeah. He, on the last part of the day, I'm realizing that I'm not going to see these people again. Why not just go for it? And he was he's like, oh, nobody ever comes on this for religious reasons. And I had just told him that we were doing it for religious reasons, which is kind of funny. And so I kind of went into I was just lay out the gospel, here's what I think, and here's why we're on the trail, and trying to show compassion and love for people and share Jesus' call to him. And we can't earn our own way, and just kind of lay it out there, because he was open to it. There was kind of a door, but mostly it was just I'm not going to see this guy again. Here's my chance. And he had kind of talked about just general vague nice thoughts, and you were having a good talk too, it sounded like.
Yeah. But I ended up talking to this lady on the beach, and so she ended up hiking with us for a while. So she studied to be a humanist chaplain, and the idea being that we're going to just try to mostly facilitate conversations with people, not necessarily bring your religion or something into it. It was one of those moments where it felt like, boy, our weird history might be perfect for this conversation.
That's nice.
Because we went to a college that the phrase that you would hear is, I'm more about the questions than the answers, which is something that she said, which sounds very nice, but it is also, it is an answer, and it is a point of view. And so the phrase that I've been coming up with over the years talking to folks like this is, the one religion in the world that I know is wrong is the one that I made up. Because I was there, I made it up. It should be the one religion I know for sure is fake, unless I am saying I am God's prophet. And so that was one of the things I wanted to talk to her about. And she had some good questions. She was asking specifically, sounds like you've researched things and you've made this decision on your own. What is it about Jesus that you find appealing? So it gave me a really nice opportunity to talk to her about God.
And what did you say in that moment too?
I actually recorded my delivery of it, and so I'll play a little bit of it now. The only way that we can be okay with God is by trusting in Christ's sacrifice, because for our sin, we deserve punishment, but if we trust in Christ, he took that punishment for us. Before I left, in my Sunday school, I was talking with one of the guys about the gospel, how do you basically deliver a gospel message? And we've been practicing together for a couple weeks before we left. So she did have some good questions about that, but she was still kind of laying on the idea of being open to things. But I was trying to push her towards, there is comfort in actually making a decision. When I brought up C.S. Lewis's thing, Jesus can only be a few things. He can be either the Lord, like he claims to be, because he does claim to be God, or he can be a liar because he was claiming to be God and he wasn't, or he's a lunatic because he's claiming to be God, and if he's not God, he's crazy. And those are really the only good ways to see Jesus based on what he said about himself. So I was encouraging her, just read the book of John and pray and try to read it in a way that if you're open to, if the Holy Spirit says something to you, be open to that. And don't be afraid of there possibly being a right answer to something.
And one of the beautiful things about being a Christian too is that God allows you to know him, and he actually wants you to know him, and wants you to know him in a certain way. That's why, like, when you read the Old Testament especially, you start seeing, yes, there's a lot of laws and things, but it's God's way of narrowing our perspective to see him as he wants to be seen. There are answers to a lot of questions. Yes, there's some things that aren't known, but there are certain things that he wants us to know and how he wants to be presented and seen and worshipped. Because you wouldn't want somebody to, like, your spouse to make up an image of who you are, right? And pretend that that's who you are when you're actually this other thing over here. You want to be known as you are. And that's what God wants from us as well. And he wants to know us in that same way.
Yeah. Well, and she brought up, like, for example, like the book Siddhartha, which is one that I've heard people bring up on other trails. And it's sort of a fictionalized journey of Siddhartha Gautama, who was the guy who came up with Buddhism. And she was talking about sort of vague love things and ideas about being open. And I had to talk to her about what Siddhartha Gautama actually came up with, which was a set of very strict laws about things like lust and, desire of items and food,
overeating.
And real Buddhism is an actual structural religion with real rules, and it's strict.
Yeah.
And to see it as anything other than strict is to miss the point of Siddhartha Gautama's work.
Again, that's a religion you make up. You know you made it up because you're not following what actual Buddhism is. And most people out here on the trail who claim to be Buddhist aren't really Buddhist.
Well, and actually, she said that the book is actually a reimagining of that. And I was like, but that isn't Buddhism.
Yeah, right. Then you know it's made up again.
You know it's made up. When you're being open to everything, you're kind of open to nothing in a lot of ways.
So now that we're at the end of our Camino, which is only a portion of the full Camino del Norte, but like, what are your takeaways and how do you feel about your progress and the goals you set out to complete here?
Oh, good question. Yeah, I feel good about going home. I was sad a few days ago. I was sad thinking about all these nice people we've met, but I've spent the last few days trying to just dwell on how many amazing friends we have back home, the good church we have, the great community we have, and the joy I get from doing the podcast is, as hard as some days are, it's a delight to be able to do the show.
And clearly useful because it's prepared you for real world conversations today.
Yeah. I don't want to put myself in a corner here, paint myself in a corner, but two places I feel like God uses me the most are at podcast conferences and on the Camino de Santiago. Because I think that in both places, I have enough in common with everybody, and most people are open or looking for something. When we made the movies, when I was writing the books, and now doing the podcast, there is joy in doing ministry online, but we used to equate it to like throwing something over a wall and hoping somebody finds it, And that's good, and that's important ministry. But I also really love doing in-person stuff, and it's good for me to meet people from around the world. So it's been really fulfilling, as all these trips have been, to talk to actual people. One of the things I've carried has been this idea I feel like I'm a boring person, or that I can be tedious because I get so fascinated by so many things, and I feel like I overwhelm people. And it's been great to come out here and have these great long conversations with people and be like, I'm not boring people. I'm part of a conversation. And
people want to hike you through your full days too.
Yeah, we've had some repeat hikers, and to find out that all the stuff that we've been talking about, not just like in the podcast, but in our lives, the weird things that Nick and I get fascinated by end up being really vital to understanding a certain conversation or preparing us for a certain place or thing.
Or giving you a word picture to work with or something.
Yeah. I mean, your science stuff, your fascination with science has come in handy. Really, the lady from the Netherlands we talked to today was delighted by your science stories.
Yeah, there's a lot of open doors through that kind of stuff. The history of science is just something I really adore.
How do you feel going home? And then what has this been like for you?
Yeah, I feel better about going home now. I still, but just to quiet my brain, to have a chance to really pray through things and see how good God has been when we make any decision. Like today, for example, there was a group of pilgrims stopping for a meal, and I just felt like we should keep going. And so I just made a decision, and about a kilometer down the road, I was like, maybe we should have stopped and been with those people. And then I had to remember, God has always provided. When we make a decision, He's ready for the next thing, and it's okay to make a decision and go with it. And it was amazing to see that work out again. That we ran into more people who wanted to walk together, and we had our own little meal, a few kilometers later, and it's just like God provided, and there were more doors opened. Every decision wasn't super critical, because I get in my own head in my day-to-day life and start thinking that every decision I make, there's only one good outcome, or I need to force this to work. I need to make sure, and I keep putting a lot of pressure on myself. And when you work in a job like I do at a church, I sometimes get that feeling like I have to get every interaction correct, because I'm the person's only opportunity to see Jesus in somebody, and it puts all the pressure and all the onus on me, instead of just being loving, being caring, being a listening presence, walking through a door when it's open. I should just relax a little bit more. And so anyway, all those things I was aiming to process, I think I'm finally getting to a point where I'm okay with that.
You know, what comes to my mind is that old song, Trust and Obey, the hymn, Trust and Obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus than to trust and obey. I think we're both obey people, and we both need to work on the trust part. Our hike ended in the lovely port city of Ribadesella, about halfway across the Camino del Norte. After a few days in Madrid, in which we did some recording for future episodes of Truce, we got on a plane and headed home. I hope you've enjoyed coming along with us on our trip. My goal here isn't getting you to do a big hike. I want to give you a window into a special subculture, to hear what my fellow pilgrims are carrying as they wrestle with life's changes, encounter strangers, and seek something bigger than themselves. Also, I hope you walk away with this with your faith in humanity restored even just a little bit. There are great people all around us, dealing with their own things. I think about what our Irish friend said to me on that park bench. While there are tragedies and villains, it's easy to get fixated on them and forget the quiet blessings. For every yellow deli or pseudo-spiritual purgatory, there are hundreds of people watching out for each other. Like the hiker who gave me an antihistamine when I fell into those stinging nettles. Or my brother, who gave me space when I got grumpy, and surprised me with electrolyte drinks when I was depleted. People everywhere need a little kindness. And if the door opens, want to know who God is. Are you willing to come alongside them, carry their burdens, and be the church? As we say on the trail, Buen Camino. Special thanks to my brother, who is an encourager and pushed me to record even when I was tired. I'm also indebted to all the people who let me interview them on the trail. Thanks also to all of you who give a little each month to help me make this show. It's probably asking a lot to say, let me take a long vacation in Spain while you give $10 a month. But hopefully you can hear how life-giving these hikes are for me. It's great to be able to connect in person with real people from all around the world. And these trips can be cheap. Some nights I paid 10 euros for a bed and often ate sandwiches and cookies from a grocery store to keep the cost down. I could only do it because of your financial support, which also paid for the small microphones I used to record this episode. And it's a real blessing to take risks like this and try new things. If you want more of this kind of out-of-the-box podcasting, consider giving a little each month to help me make Truce. $10 goes a long way. Learn how at trucepodcast.com/donate. If you want to see pictures of our hike, visit the website at trucepodcast.com and search for this episode. I'll also be posting photos on social media. Thanks also to Diane for getting my mail while I was gone, and for covering for Nick so that he could come as well. Truce is a production of Truce Media, LLC. God willing, we'll talk again soon, and continue the normal season of the show. I'm Chris Starin, and this is Truce.